Welcome to Cruise News, your daily update on everything happening at sea. Visit cruisenews.io to see today's stories and sign up for email alerts.
So usually when we look at industry trends, we're tracking, the physical specs of a new ship build or maybe a pivot in main dining room concepts.
Right, the typical hardware and software stuff.
Exactly. But today, we're analyzing a massive structural shift in how the entire cruise industry operates. And we're viewing this evolution through one very specific, increasingly vital market, which is Alaska.
Yeah, the perception of Alaska within the industry has undergone just a complete inversion lately.
Yeah.
For decades, deployment teams viewed the region as a reliable but kind of secondary cold climate alternative.
Sure, just a place to keep the hardware profitable during the summer months.
Exactly. But that dynamic is entirely gone. The tail is basically wagging the dog now. The structural demands of the Alaska market are forcing cruise corporations to fundamentally alter their actual business models. It's fascinating. So we're going to trace the anatomy of this shift today. We'll start by examining the math behind the current unprecedented capacity crunch, because that's leading to, major logistical friction and oversold megaships.
Yeah, and from there, we really need to look at the radical transformation happening in onboard retail and entertainment economics.
Right. And finally, we'll explore the port infrastructure itself. We'll look at how cruise lines are physically and financially wiring their operations into the municipal grids of these Alaskan communities.
Which, requires a completely different operational playbook than sailing the Caribbean or the Mediterranean.
Right, totally different beast.
Yeah. The physical limitations of the geography combined with just this overwhelming consumer demand, it's forcing a reckoning in revenue management.
So let's start with those physical limitations and really the scramble to manage capacity. To understand the scale of this, we have to look at Royal Caribbean's deployment. Specifically, Voyager of the Seas making its Alaska season debut out of Seattle.
Yeah, Voyager of the Seas represents a really significant footprint to drop into this market. It was built in 1999. But at over 137,000 gross tons, it's still a massive piece of hardware.
Oh, absolutely.
At maximum occupancy, you're talking about up to 4,000 passengers, and that's supported by around 1,200 crew members.
So Royal Caribbean is deploying an incredible amount of tonnage here. Voyager is actually joining a robust four-ship lineup in Alaska. It's running alongside Anthem, Ovation, and Serenade of the Seas.
That's a lot of beds to fill.
It is. And between them, they're covering departures out of Seattle, Vancouver, and Seward. Voyager itself is running two distinct seven-night itineraries. You have the Alaska experience, which calls on Juneau, Skagway, Sitka, and Victoria.
Nice classic route.
Right? And then there's the Alaska Adventure, which adds scenic cruising through Endicott Arm and Dawes Glacier.
But managing that kind of inventory requires really aggressive optimization. The revenue management teams are tasked with ensuring that every single one of those 4,000 beds generates maximum yield.
Which brings us to the breaking point of that optimization strategy. We saw this recently with the June 19th departure of Voyager of the Seas out of Seattle. The ship was completely oversold.
Completely bursting at the seams.
Yeah. On June 12th, so just 1 week prior to embarkation, guests received this urgent communication from the line asking for volunteers with flexible travel arrangements to basically alter their plans. And the buyout incentives were just staggering.
They really were. They were forced to throw the financial kitchen sink at the problem just to clear capacity.
Seriously. Volunteers were offered a full refund of their original fare, plus a 50% future cruise credit. Also, a similar stateroom on an alternate sailing, and total reimbursement for travel expenses like airfare and hotels.
That's a massive payout.
And alternatively, if a guest just wanted to cancel entirely, they offered a full refund plus a 100% future cruise credit.
Wow.
But the timeline here really highlights the logistical friction. Guests were informed they might not know if they were officially selected to be bumped until June 18th.
The day before embarkation.
Literally the day before.
Which is just a nightmare scenario for passenger relations. Think about a family flying into Seattle from the East Coast. They might be sitting in their pre-cruise hotel not knowing if they actually have a cabin on the ship they're looking at out the window.
Exactly. And, people hear the term overbooked and default to the airline model. But getting bumped from a 2-hour flight is really just a routing issue. You wait in the terminal, you get a voucher, and take the next flight 3 hours later.
Right. It's a minor inconvenience.
But getting bumped from a 7-day, highly scheduled cruise vacation where you've coordinated flights, PTO, pet sitters, that's a catastrophic disruption. So why are the revenue management algorithms pushing inventory management this close to the absolute edge?
Well, it comes down to yield management software relying on historical decay curves that are just no longer accurate for this specific market.
What do you mean by decay curves?
So the projections show Alaska as the sixth largest cruise destination globally in 2025. They're expecting to draw 1.7 million guests. When an algorithm sees that level of velocity in bookings, it tries to counter natural attrition. Historically, the software knows that for any given sailing, a predictable percentage of people will cancel at the last minute.
Because of illness or missed flight connections or emergencies?
Exactly. So this system intentionally over-indexes to avoid sailing with empty beds. It sells, let's say, 103% of the ship's physical capacity, operating on the mathematical assumption that natural attrition will drop the final manifest right back down to 100%.
Right.
The problem is that the demand curve for Alaska right now is incredibly rigid. These are high-priced bucket list vacations. People are not canceling. The algorithm's historical data fails to account for the current consumer psychology. Nobody drops out, the natural attrition never happens, and suddenly you have 4,100 people holding tickets for a ship with a hard maritime capacity of 4,000.
And maritime law dictates you cannot sail with more passengers than you have physical lifeboat seats for.
Exactly. So the cruise line has to buy people out of their contracts, regardless of the financial hit to the bottom line. The structural demand is literally breaking the traditional math of cruise inventory.
That's wild. So if the physical capacity of the ship is an absolute hard cap, and the algorithms can't safely overbook to squeeze out extra margin anymore, the lines have to look internally, right? To increase revenue, you have to extract a higher yield from the passengers you've already brought on board.
Precisely. Which forces a complete recalculation of onboard retail and entertainment. We're seeing a shift away from traditional maritime retail models toward intensive hyperlocal immersion.
Let's look at how Virgin Voyages is approaching this. They've got the Brilliant Lady making its inaugural Alaska season in 2026. They're running 17 Seattle departures, ranging from 7 to 12 nights, stretching through September. And Virgin is treating the onboard commercial space entirely differently than legacy operators.
Yeah, Virgin built their brand on disruption, but their retail strategy here is really indicative of a broader industry evolution.
So Starboard, the company that operates the retail spaces, reported this fascinating metric. Their Alaska-exclusive merchandise now generates over 50% of onboard retail sales on these specific itineraries.
Half of the entire retail revenue. That's huge.
Half of it, driven entirely by regional goods. We're looking at partnerships with local vendors like M&W Design Company, who produce sustainably made wooden postcards and ship standees. They also rolled out a Virgin and Salty Sisters Red collection, featuring handcrafted jewelry and bolo ties.
And the culinary integration is just as aggressive as the hard goods.
Oh, yeah. They introduced a Taste of Alaska line. Passengers are buying products from Barnacle Foods, Chugach Chocolates, and the Prince William Sound Salt Company. In total, they have 10 different regional brands stocked in the onboard boutiques.
Wow.
They also developed specific apparel lines. There's Dreamy Alaska, Happy Camper, and Little Scouts. And the strategy relies heavily on personalization. So a passenger buys a canvas bag or a jacket and customizes it at a retail station with local patches and pins.
And you see the programming architecture mirroring that retail supply chain.
Right, with the onboard scheduling. They're running primetime ports, destination lectures, sketching sessions titled Drawn to the Wild, culinary events like Baking Alaska dessert pairings.
That's a clever name.
Yeah, and localized Crack the Crab trivia. Virgin is even modifying their signature Happenings cast, which are their roaming onboard entertainers. They're bringing in a lumberjack and a naturalist and pairing them with a cultural heritage guide sourced directly from Alaska Native voices.
Which is such a smart move for authenticity.
Yeah, Virgin's COO, Michelle Bentubo, noted that deep partnerships were essential to tell the region's story authentically. And Starboard is executing this model across the industry, not just Virgin. For Princess Cruises, they commissioned 250 individually numbered Pendleton Woolen Mills blankets created exclusively for the line.
Yeah, they're really leaning into scarcity there.
So to put an analogy on this, it looks like the industry is recognizing the death of the generic airport duty-free model. They're ripping out the standard luxury watches and generic liquor aisles and replacing them with a curated floating Etsy storefront.
I would actually push back on the storefront analogy a bit.
Oh, yeah. Why is that?
Well, a storefront implies a passive retail relationship, right? Just buying wholesale and marking it up. But by directly integrating organizations like Alaska Native Voices and scaling operations for small regional brands like Barnacle Foods, the cruise lines are acting more like venture capital incubators for these port towns.
That is a crucial distinction. Because the logistics of scaling a small local vendor for a massive ship are incredibly complex.
Exactly. A local salt producer in Prince William Sound cannot naturally supply the weekly inventory demands of a megaship. Starboard and the cruise corporations have to actively build and finance the logistical pipelines to make these hyper-local partnerships viable at an industrial scale. Starboard CEO Lisa Bauer refers to these products as meaningful reminders.
Meaningful reminders, huh?
Yeah. The modern premium fare passenger does not want a generic branded t-shirt anymore. They want to actively consume the culture they're sailing through.
Right. Authenticity has basically become the highest margin product a cruise line can inventory. Scarcity and local provenance drive the premium pricing, which explains those individually numbered Pendleton blankets. But if cruise lines are functioning as venture capital incubators to scale local goods on board, it raises a massive question about the physical destinations themselves.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, what happens when the 190,000 passengers projected across more than 100 cruise calls this summer physically disembark into the small towns that produce those goods?
You immediately collide with the absolute physical limits of municipal infrastructure. I mean, a ship carrying 4,000 passengers cannot dock in a town with a permanent population of, say, 2,900 without fundamentally altering the local ecosystem.
And that's exactly what we're seeing in Seward, Alaska. The infrastructure modernization happening there is staggering. They recently opened the new Dale R. and Carol Ann Lindsay Alaska Railroad Terminal. It's a $137 million facility replacing docks that date back to the mid-1960s.
Which is a huge upgrade for the region.
Oh, totally. And it connects directly to the Alaska Railroad for onward travel up to Anchorage and Fairbanks. But crucially, Royal Caribbean Group just signed a 30-year use commitment for this new terminal.
And a 30-year operational commitment forces a corporation to view a port city through an entirely different risk management lens.
You can see that risk management in the technical specifications of the terminal development. The modernization features a shore power system funded by a Clean Ports grant from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency.
Oh.
So shore power, or cold ironing, allows the ship to plug into the grid and shut down its diesel engines.
Right, reducing local emissions.
But the mechanism here is unique. Excess winter power stored in the terminal's massive battery systems will serve as a backup power supply for the town of Seward during severe winter weather.
That's incredible. The cruise lines are basically engineering their maritime terminals to act as municipal grid stabilizers.
It goes even beyond the power grid, straight into civic agriculture. Royal Caribbean Group runs a small business accelerator through their SEA, the Future platform. It's called Port Partners. They took a 15-person cohort from South Central Alaska, provided them with intensive business coaching, and even granted them 3 university credits.
That's a serious investment in local human capital.
Yeah, and the first Port Partners Award went to Sydney Singer, who operates Glacier Greenhouses.
Which is fascinating. Funding a local greenhouse is a massive pivot from traditional maritime operations.
Let's look at the logistics of that grant. Royal Caribbean provided $20,000 in business mentorship to fund 6 new solar-powered greenhouse modules. Now, in an Alaskan winter, fresh produce is notoriously expensive and difficult to source.
Extremely difficult.
So this specific infrastructure upgrade is projected to raise the greenhouse's year-round food output from 700 pounds in 2026 to 4,000 pounds within a single year.
That's a huge leap in production.
Right. Preston Carnahan, Royal Caribbean's VP of Destination Development, stated the explicit goal is ensuring Seward's 2,900 residents have access to a healthy diet of fruits and vegetables.
But if we look at the underlying motivation here, we really have to recognize that this is not just corporate philanthropy. It is a strict operational necessity.
Okay, explain the mechanism behind that necessity. Why is a maritime corporation concerned with municipal vegetable yields? It sounds so outside their wheelhouse.
Well, when a corporation drops $137 million on a terminal and signs a 30-year lease, their primary operational threat is not a competing cruise line. The primary threat is destination collapse.
Destination collapse.
Yes. We've seen the mechanics of destination fatigue in European ports like Venice and Barcelona. When the volume of tourism overwhelms the local supply chains, when grocery stores, water treatment facilities, and electrical grids just buckle under the strain, the local residents push back and the regulatory environment turns hostile.
Because the residents are effectively priced out of their own community's resources.
Exactly. I mean, a town of 2,900 people cannot absorb 190,000 summer visitors without immense structural strain. If the residents of Seward cannot afford fresh food in January, or if their municipal power grid fails during a winter storm because the economic velocity basically left with the ships in September, the town eventually hollers out.
Wow.
And if the time dies, the multi-million-dollar cruise destination fails.
So by investing in Seward's winter power grid backup and funding solar modules to radically bump local agricultural yield, Royal Caribbean is actively managing their social license to operate.
They are vertically integrating the long-term survival of the destination into their corporate business model. They recognize that the viability of their maritime product relies entirely on the economic stability of the local Alaskan resident, who, by the way, may never even step foot on a cruise ship.
Which leaves us with a truly fascinating question to consider as we watch this industry continue to evolve. I mean, when megaships are pulling into ports and plugging into civic grids they helped engineer, and when maritime corporations are directly funding the local greenhouses that feed the residents through the brutal winter months, where exactly is the line drawn between a maritime tourism company and a regional infrastructure provider?
That is the million-dollar question.
In the near future, as you step off the gangway into these remote ports, will you be sailing on a ship that is functionally and financially indistinguishable from the local economy it's visiting? Something to think about. Thanks for listening to Cruise News. Visit cruisenews.io to catch up on the latest updates and sign up for free email alerts.